Hey, folks, thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate you being here. I sort of kind of have a bit of a captive audience because, of course, y'all got to eat, right? And you get your food in here, so you might as well stay in here and eat unless I do something stupid and make you want to leave while I'm in the middle of my speech. So let me back this up to the beginning, and I'm going the wrong way. There we go. This is a brand new control. All right, there we go. We're going to talk today about driving decisions with data, delight, or disaster. I was an educator for 10 years before I got into IT. So as an educator, you have a handout sheet that is at your place if you left your stuff at your place. Those new that are coming in that didn't grab one, trusty assistant will be happy. Josh, I have a son named Josh, so that is a wonderful name for a person. Oh, wow. Nice plug for my book. All right. So anyway, he's going to be distributing these to you as you get to your seats because I don't know how many of you in line had your stuff at the table. So hopefully you won't get two of them. And I mentioned being an educator. Not only do you get a handout sheet, but guess what? You also get candy. I'll be asking questions throughout, and I'll be tossing candy, and hopefully it won't land in your beef stroganoff or whatever it is that you're eating. It's Skittles. So if you have a thing about chocolate, don't worry about it. All right. Without any further ado, let me go ahead and get started. Put this down here. Albert Einstein's been quoted as saying, "Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts." Now, whether Einstein actually said this or not, he certainly embodied the sentiment by recognizing the value of using data to drive decisions. In fact, recent Forbes and Tech Jury studies have estimated that more data was created in a single minute in 2023 than the data created during Einstein's entire life. Now, how in the world can all that data be put to use for IT professionals like us? You know, that's the key, is it not? Should it be driving our decision making? Should it at least be influencing our decision making? Well, to that point, in a recent Forrester survey of more than 1,000 U.S. companies, 91% of them said that data-driven decision making was important to their business, while only 57% said that they actually used data to make decisions in their business. Why such a disconnect? Well, let me illustrate. Deep in the halls of Building 7 of the Rochester Institute of Technology, there exists a structure, a wonderful structure called the Asterian Stairwell. Designed by Filipino architect Rafael Nelson Abaganda in 1968, of all things, this architectural marvel has been wowing students for decades. While not all that many know about it, the lucky few who have seen it and experienced it are blown out of their minds. I mean, imagine a staircase that loops back on itself, one in which you go up one flight of stairs, turn a 90-degree angle around a corner in the wall, and then going up another flight of stairs, and somehow you wind up exactly where you started. What's up with that? Yeah, serious. You should see the amazing YouTube video in which a couple of Rochester faculty members demonstrate the phenomenon to the utter amazement and amusement of several students. Their shocked reactions, along with the passion of the filmmakers, is simply priceless. As a matter of fact, I'd like to show you a brief 1-minute clip so you can see what I'm talking about.
Have you been here before to the stairwell?
Check out what happens.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Have you heard about it?
No.
Okay.
Never.
Okay.
Never.
But what I want you to do is just walk up the stairs and wait for me on the next floor.
Just go
Just go on up.
upstairs.
There you go.
That's it?
That's it.
Now, this person, the faculty member, is demonstrating the Asterian stairwell to a student.
Just keep walking.
Watch what happens.
Rosie! What are you doing here?
Yeah. I told you it was priceless, right? You know, that poor girl, she didn't get any of my candy. So, she didn't know what was going on. I told you it was priceless. Now, you want to know what else is priceless? The way the folks at RIT were able to pull off such an elaborate hoax. Yeah, you heard me correctly. I said hoax. Complete with scholarly articles on the internet, tons of fake reference materials, testimonials, and a pretty convincing video on YouTube, as well as you just saw for yourself here, right? I wish I had the time to show the whole thing to you. I mean, the thing's about 7 minutes long. It's fascinating. Google it sometime when you get a chance. The Ascherian stairwell. Now, what's my point, other than entertaining you? The visual data that you're seeing here is trying to convince you of something you know good and well is physically impossible. I mean, come on. A staircase that loops back on itself? The laws of physics cannot be violated in this way, all right? This is just, very clever use of manipulative, fake data. As much as I myself, the first time I saw it, holy snap, I really wanted to believe in this riveting phenomenon, but my gut was saying, this just can't be. But isn't that the whole point, though, right? What about going with your gut? Well, there's something to be said about your gut. And no, wait a minute. I'm not talking about that gut. I'm not talking about somebody's large stomach when I say gut here. No, all teasing aside. I'm talking about your intuition, of course, right? But that intuition needs to be informed in order for it to be reliable. Otherwise, guess what? You are in data denial. Now, with that said, how do we get from being in data denial to being data-driven? That's the whole point of this message. Hopefully not go crazy in the process like me. Let me suggest 5 best practices or steps to help us get there. Now, they all rhyme, so it should make things a little bit easier for you to remember. At least I hope so. It'll also help you if you use the fill-in-the-blank worksheets that were distributed to you. Please note that the blanks that you will see on your sheet correspond to the underlined words that you're going to see on the screen as I go through the presentation. All right? These 5 steps are dominance, relevance, significance, surveillance, and vigilance. Everybody ready? Let's jump into this thing. All right. The first step is dominance with the key verb of look. Please note that all 5 of the key verbs that go with these 5 steps will begin with the letter L. And that'll make it even easier, again, for you to remember. So it's important to start off by looking at the objectives involved and prioritizing them according to your organization's mission, vision, and goals. Okay? You're looking for insight. Now, insight has been defined as a finding that contradicts what you know, confirms or denies what you suspect, or quantifies how important that knowledge is. Actionable insight, which is what you really want, right, goes a step further by leading you to either act and adapt, or to confirm that maybe you don't need to take any action in the first place, right? I think it's all about overcoming your bias. I see bias as the enemy of opportunity. They talked about that this morning. You can't really deny your biases, ignore them, and say, I'm not biased about anything. Okay, well, there's some that might sound like a nice thing to say, but you know what? It's not entirely accurate. Scientists tell us that our brains do not place the same amount of attention on every decision we make. I mean, that's just the way we're wired. But instead, we take what one neuroscientist, Chris Weller, refers to as mental shortcuts, which of course are better known as, what do y'all think? Starts with a B. Shout it out. Bias. That's right. That's correct. You guessed it. Bias. Think of these as making up sort of a grid through which we all funnel or filter our decision-making processes, right? Now, in and of themselves, Biases are neither good nor bad. They're pretty much neutral. I'll talk some more about that in just a little bit. They can either help us, right, or they can hurt us. For example, if you're biased about, I don't know, say, making decisions quickly, well, that can help you if you're in a sinking boat, right? But it can hurt you if, say, you're trying to figure out who to marry. I don't have that problem, thank God. Research conducted by Weller and his colleagues and many others has identified a whole bunch of broad categories of biases, of which 3 are relevant to my topic today. First, there's the expedience bias, in which, I alluded to that, you tend to act quickly rather than, say, take more time to make your decisions. Now, this one crops up when you're deciding about a course of action after seeing only, say, one line graph or one heat map or one pie chart. You don't take the time to validate what you're looking at, right? And you could just be led to a wrong decision with faulty data just because the graph looked pretty or the person presenting it to you was pretty convincing, one or the other, right? Then there's the experience bias, which reflects our tendency to take our perception to be the only objective, unchangeable truth, right? Well, I've seen that before, you might say. Yeah, that's the way we've always done it, without taking other valid points of view into consideration. Finally, there's the equivalence bias, in which we instinctively seem to gravitate towards what is equivalent, right? What is like us over what differs from us. The same neuroscientist I've been talking about here, Chris Weller, says that this happens because, watch this now, humans are highly motivated to see themselves and those who are similar in a favorable light. Yeah, bless you. This in turn makes us more likely to accept data and reports coming from these sources more readily than other sources. Guess what? That's whether the source is reliable or not. Yeah? As much as I like this research, this is weird. Yeah, okay, I'm convinced that the stuff that Weller and his colleagues came up with is legit. Okay, but you know what? I don't know about you, but the choice of words here is a little bit strange. Look at the first phrase again a little bit more closely. Humans are highly motivated to see themselves. Okay. I don't know if you saw that or not, but you got to kind of wonder about somebody who refers to the humans in the third person. Think about that for just a second. Let it sink in, okay? I don't know. I'm not going to read too much into it. That's all right. That's all right. Chris is probably a good guy, so I think I'm connected to him on LinkedIn. But anyway, the best course of action is not to deny these biases. You can't. Pretend that they don't exist. You won't. Try to get rid of them. You can't. But rather to mitigate them by taking action, such as to, let's say, pull in more information, right? Reframe the smaller question in the light of a bigger picture. To that point, Dr. Jennifer Myries, Associate Dean and Professor of Cardiology at Hofstra University School of Medicine, she advocates 5 strategies to mitigate bias. Now, I'll mention the 2 that I believe have the most relevance to the topic today. All right. First of all, she suggests embrace the reality of human bias. I hinted at that already, right? We already know that biases are intrinsic to human nature, right? It stems from some of our primal instincts and so on. And although they're not inherently negative, it's essential, she says, to identify and mitigate potential harmful effects. I kind of hinted at that too. Anyway, these biases often arise from social or emotional constructs right here that are rooted in our past rather than in rational reality. Lastly, Myries suggests that we practice what she calls constructive uncertainty. I love that term. Essentially, as she puts it, It involves asking questions from a non-judgmental place, okay, along with checking assumptions made about yourself and others. In other words, don't just take that graph at face value or upon first glance. Everybody knows that. Hey, folks, check those assumptions at the door, ladies and gentlemen. You got to do it, right? I think that's valid advice for any information technology professional or any other professional who wants to adopt a data-driven mindset without letting bias get in the way. That's dominance. Second step is relevance. The key verb is link. After you prioritize your objectives, excuse me, it's time to find and present relevant data. In other words, link after you've looked. Your stakeholders need to see how the data being presented is relevant to the situation at hand, the issue being addressed, the flaw being remediated, the defect being reported, the concern being discussed, or the problem being resolved. Now, as you are presenting and linking the data, it's important to consider the 4 V's of big data, namely volume, velocity, variety, and veracity. The conceptualization that I'm showing you on the screen here was put forth by IBM data scientists maybe about 12 years ago, 14, something like that. Anyways, 4 dimensions or characteristics that make big data, big data, okay? And while some of the specific numbers and stats that you'll see on the infographic as we zoom in on each of the 4 parts, they might be a little bit outdated, but the concepts that it describes are timeless. The first V, volume. How much data do you have, right? Yeah, of course, these days, well, it's measured in terabytes and petabytes and exabytes and zettabytes and boo-boo bytes or whatever. I'm making this up. Exponentially larger than the kilobytes that they used when I first started off as an IT professional many moons ago. Do not let the gray hairs fool you, everybody, okay? I'm not that old. So Reuters has estimated that the world's storage of data will continue to increase by 50% every year. I mean, it's sheer volume. And, even within moderately sized organizations, takes a huge amount of processing power to analyze and gain insights from. Additional research has shown that unstructured data, such as images, audio, and data files, video files, and so forth, account for 70 to 85% of this volume. Second D, velocity. Now, that can be expressed in a couple of different ways. The speed at which the data is coming at you, right, being generated, and also the rate at which it's being consumed. You're pulling it in, right? Think of data streaming services such as Amazon Prime, Netflix, Hulu, Crackle, Slingbox, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, Discovery Plus, and all the other pluses and others that, along with their customers, must rely on the availability of massive bandwidth for transmission and discrete processing for analysis. The same principle holds true for commodities, futures, stock tradings, credit card sales, retail sales, and a whole bunch of other instant transactional-based industries in which the speed and timeliness of the capture, and, well, the reporting too, for that matter, is critical for nailing down patterns and for making predictions. For example, talk about your volume here. The average daily amount of shares that were traded on the New York Stock Exchange, on average, in February of 2024, was more than 1.7 billion shares, having an average market value of almost $1.9 trillion. Wow, that's a fairly decent chunk of change, okay? According to a 2023 report by the Journal of Financial Analytics, the New York Stock Exchange now captures approximately 100 terabytes of trade information during each trading session. That's every day. And if you look at the upper left corner here, the infographic, see that? Man, oh man. You see what that's like a 100-fold increase in less than 11 years. Now, even though that jaw-dropping statistic might seem like it's all about volume, and to be fair, we are talking about a pretty colossal amount of data, right? But no, the reason that it's hanging out here with the velocity V instead of the volume V, it's because, it's all crammed into a single trading session, right? Picture this. It takes some serious warp speed velocity to snatch up that much data in just one wild ride. Okay? That's the idea. The third V is variety. That is, what are the different sources of data that are available? How complex are they? I alluded to this a little bit earlier when I talked about volume, right? Traditional data sources fit pretty nicely into structures like relational databases, and even when voluminous, are relatively straightforward to extract, analyze, and report on. But then again, there's also the unstructured data that I brought up earlier, right? The more complex stuff. All that goes way beyond both traditional storage and traditional analysis. I love the way Jason Williamson put it. He's the assistant professor at the University of Virginia. He said, think of structured data as data that's well-defined in a set of rules. With unstructured data, I think he said something like this, there are no rules. Take a look at this on your screen. One of the goals of big data is to use technology to take this unstructured data and make sense of it. The fourth V, veracity. Is the data trustworthy, right? Can you count on it to be true and right? I mean, what good is it to have huge amounts of data, rich, complex data coming at you in real time at some breakneck speed if you cannot rely upon its truth and accuracy? Look at the infographic. 1 in 3 businesses, it says, these leaders don't trust the information that they use to make decisions. In another survey, right here in the middle on the left, I don't know if you can see it or not, but more than 1 out of every 4 were not even sure about how much of their data was inaccurate. Here's something else to consider. With the usual business analytics, where volume and variety are both kind of small, and I guess maybe even velocity too, the organization tends to have greater control over the data, and as a result, of course, there's going to be greater veracity. They're controlling it better, right? But with big data, on the other hand, with greater volume over here and greater variety over here, well, there's a greater likelihood of uncertainty. Now, I'm not necessarily implying any deliberate dishonesty, okay? But it's just the nature of the beast that comes with the introduction of more and more unstructured data. Inside Big Data web publisher Stephanie Ehlers once wrote, "What kind of noise and abnormality do you have to deal with?" Great question. Well, that's the end of step 2, relevance. Now, we come to the third step in our odyssey, which is significance. The key verb is listen. You've prioritized your objectives. You've presented relevant data. Now, guess what? It's time to start drawing conclusions from that data. That is, after you've looked and linked, start listening for significance. You know what? There has to be some meaning to what you're seeing, right? They're the ones that have the highest priority and relate the most to your mission, vision, and goals. So start searching for significant patterns, trends, nuances that give the indication of the general direction. In other words, you have to listen to what the data is telling you, whether it's an upward or a downward trend, right? A statistical fluctuation or correlation, or maybe even nothing at all. That happens too. See, finding patterns in order to draw conclusions is nothing new. Why, if you think about it, we've been doing that ever since we were little kids. Your fifth grade math teacher, let's say, writes a series of numbers on the board as I'm showing you here on the screen. Look closely, 42, 36, 31, 27, and 24. And then asks you to determine what the next two numbers will be. Guess what? Now that you're almost through eating, I'm going to make this fun, I hope, and give you a couple of minutes and see who can be the first person, not yet, be the first person to raise your hand and tell me what you think the pattern is and what you think the next two numbers are going to be in the sequence. Let me get some candy here. All right. Yes, sir, right there. 22 and 21. I hope this makes it to you. Oh my gosh, that was awesome. Good catch. Yeah, 22 and 21. All right, is there someone else who can tell me how did this man know that it was 20? I did not talk to him beforehand. I said, hey, when you answer, you didn't tell me. No, he knew. I've never seen this gentleman before in my life. You're a nice man, but I've never seen you. Yeah, right. No. All right. Can anybody else tell me how, besides incredible intelligence, how was it that he figured out that the next two numbers would be 22 and 21? Who can raise your hand? Yes, ma'am. It's decrementing by one. Okay, I hope this doesn't land in your drink. All right, not bad. I'm getting better at this. I tell you, I speak at a bunch of these all over the world, and so you'd think after a while I start getting good at it. I didn't go out for baseball when I was a kid, but yeah, that's great. All right, okay, let me find the clicker. Hold on. There it is. Okay. Yeah, but you are correct. The next two numbers in the sequence are 22 and 21. You look like that kid there. Yeah. See, you knew this because you figured out the pattern, right? That each number was being subtracted by one number less than the one before it, starting with -6, -5, -4. You figured out, right? 42 minus 6 is 36. 36 minus 5 is, 31 and so forth. Right. But now that you figure out the pattern, that's key. It made it easier for now everybody knows that the next two numbers in the series would subtract 2 and then subtract 1, which is why these two incredibly intelligent individuals, like everybody else in this august body of amazing information technology professionals, buttering you up, yeah. Anyway, he said 22 and 21. Right. Now, we continue to use pattern recognition. Maybe we don't see it as such, but if we are to become data-driven, here's my whole point. This listening, this drawing of conclusions that I'm talking about needs to be honed by questioning patterns. That is, are they linear? Are they exponential? Are they stationary? Are they damped? Are they seasonal? Are they random? Are they cyclical? Right? That kind of thing. New York Times best-selling author and public policy professor of Dartmouth College, Charles Wheeler, cited an extraordinary example of this about a police department in Santa Cruz who claimed that they can solve a crime before it's even committed. No fooling. No, they're not channeling their inner Tom Cruise or anything, right? Yeah, remember Minority Report movie? Yeah, no, it's just applying skills to checking out the data and recognizing patterns. That's all it is. By looking at mountains of crime data and determining when and where crimes were happening most often, they were able to dispatch more officers to those more likely locations. Just that simple. One of those locations was a parking garage, much like that one. There have been quite a few car break-ins there, and guess what? While on patrol, the officers spotted a couple of suspicious-looking women who were loitering near a car, looking like they're going to break into it. Oh, it gets better than that. One of the two women had an outstanding warrant, and the other one had drugs on her. I'm not making this up. They arrested them both before they had a chance to break into the car. Crystal ball? Genius? Nostradamus, maybe? Nope. None of the above. It was just using data and listening to spot the patterns and then deploy resources where they would likely do the most good. It's just that simple, okay? That's great news. However, the tale of data-driven policing takes an unexpected bad turn. And while the initial triumphs, such as the incident in a parking garage that I just described, fueled optimism about this initiative, cracks soon began to appear. Concerns from the community emerged, shedding light on an unintended consequence. What was that friction between law enforcement and the community? See, rather than fostering cooperation, predictive policing in certain cases here exacerbated tensions instead. And therein lies the rub, ladies and gentlemen. Technology, despite its noble intentions, sometimes can yield unforeseen drawbacks. And that's precisely why transparency and accountability are crucial in any initiative. As the City Council of Santa Cruz decided, they said, well, simply banning the technology won't work. Instead, they needed to adopt a nuanced approach to make it work. More discourse, more ongoing evaluation, and more auditing, right? Those things were essential to ensure that predictive policing would fulfill its intended purposes, and that is safeguarding communities without alienating them like they were doing. Whether you like this or not, this Santa Cruz saga encapsulates a fundamental truth, and that is, even well-intentioned data initiatives can have unforeseen drawbacks. But instead of completely throwing them away, I think we should strive to at least refine them, fix them, learn from mistakes, and implement them with fairness at the core, right? By fostering, prioritizing good vibes, okay? We can transform data solutions from being potential dividers into being powerful bridges that connect communities, promoting safety and collaboration. End of commercial. All right, now, getting back to the listening aspect of what I was talking about. One of the best ways to listen is to ask questions. And as Whelan put it, I love this. Interesting answers are out there. People who care about those answers just need to go looking for them, maybe with a little bit of prodding. We could all use that, right? The fourth step is surveillance. The key verb is leverage. And before we go any farther, let's have a quick review and see how much you guys remember. I got some more candy. Who can tell me what the first step is? Starts with a D. Yes, sir. Dominance. Oh boy, this is a challenge. You wait. Notice how people are ducking. Oh, right in his hand. Dang, I'm getting better at this. All right, dominance. What's the second step? Who said that? Over here. All right, another long distance. I'll try overhanded. Forgive me. Incomplete. Yeah, that was an incomplete pass. Right. Dominance, relevance. What's the third one? Starts with an S. Significance. Who said that? Oh, wow. Oh, bounced off. Sorry. I hope your insurance will cover that. No, okay. Dominance, relevance, significance. Right. All right. What are the three verbs? Let's just do this for everybody. The first verb starts with an L is look. What's the second one? Link. What's the third one? Listen. Look, link, and listen. Man, y'all are an awesome audience. And my apologies over there. I hope I didn't mess up anybody's food. All right, let me put this candy up for a while here. Okay. So far, you've looked at what has dominance, you've linked what has relevance, and you've listened to what has significance. Now get in there and guess what? Leverage what has been gathered. That is, plan your strategy and put what you have so far into practice. Guess what that takes? Surveillance. Now, you know what? There's something to be said about the importance of the planning stage. But you know what? Planning without execution results in wasted time and failed projects. Whereas if you flip it around, right? Execution without planning can often lead to disaster as well. You can't win for losing. So what do? Let's try to find a way to balance the two, right, for your own situation and leverage those efforts to be able to move forward. Some of the things that can be leveraged would include challenging the status quo. They talked about that this morning. The preconceived notions that we would normally think cannot be contradicted. For example, some people might loudly proclaim, "Oh, you cannot mix quantitative data with qualitative data. Will not happen." Oh, yeah? Says who? And since when? You know what? I'm convinced you need both. And guess what? You can have both. "Oh my, sacrilege! That's blasphemy, Dr. Joe. No, you shouldn't say that." Well, okay. Hear me out. Don't throw tomatoes at me. I believe that you can quantify qualitative data, and you can also qualify quantitative data in your step of surveillance. I'm fixing to show you how. But before I do that and tell you what I mean by that, I honestly believe I need to lay just a little bit of groundwork and talk about what is meant by quantitative and qualitative data. Now, please, I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence here, okay? Like all good IT professionals, I'm sure you already have the concept, but I'd like to illustrate it graphically to make it have more impact. All right, quantitative data. That's what you use when you are trying to determine the what or the how many of a particular issue, right? It's generally depicted as data that defines. You have finite, discrete, measurable values, or, quantities to be what? Quantified, right? Yeah, hence the word. Yeah, counted. That's the deal. All right? It is objective, deductive, based on numbers, easier to generalize. For instance, that's supposed to be hiking boots. Suppose you owned a sporting goods store, and you're selling hiking boots. Now, whether your customers are going to use it to go, hike up Camelback Mountain or something, whatever, the data that you're going to gather is easily plottable. Number of boots for each day, week, month, whatever period you're looking at, right? Boom, one and done. You can plot it easily, okay? By contrast, qualitative data looks at the characteristics, attributes, nuances, approximations. Rather than define, like quantitative, this is data that describes. See the difference, okay? It's data that can be recorded through observations. It tends to be subjective rather than objective. Aligns itself more with inductive reasoning rather than deductive. It's based on words rather than numbers, and it's more difficult to generalize. Now, continuing with the sporting goods store analogy, let's say you wanted to gauge customer satisfaction with those hiking boots, the same ones we were talking about a minute ago. So you include a couple of open-ended questions on your survey, asking people to describe how they feel about those boots. Well, wait just a minute. That's not so quantifiable, is it? How do we get out of this? Well, still, the two can be leveraged together. Okay, you can enrich the quantitative data and pull more qualifying information from it by asking more detailed questions in the data gathering phase. That is, rather than simply yes or no questions. Did you like the boots? Yes or no. Did you buy enough? Yes or no. Whatever, that kind of thing. Determine the extent of their opinion by asking them, say, to rate the boots on a scale of 1 to 5, several different characteristics. You not only get the discrete values that you can plot on a graph, but you also can get more depth into your observations and can therefore tease out a more comprehensive picture. I call that qualifying the quantitative. Now, what about qualitative data? How can you quantify something that has no quantity, right? Without any numbers or anything, something that's so ethereal. and subjective, like we talked about. How do you take narrative text, for example, and derive some sort of measurable, meaningful pattern out of it? May I suggest the use of qualitative analysis software that can read through massive amounts of text and set up a frequency distribution of words that you can then catalog and arrange and put into discrete attributes. Let's say along 1 to 5 scale of good to bad, soft to hard, that kind of thing. Whatever other contrasting pair you might want to derive. Okay? You then have categories that you can measure, plotting them against, say, the number of people in your population who used those terms, right? Gaining even greater depth into the dimensions of the popularity of that particular item, okay? Or maybe the lack thereof. Dr. Rachel Morris, professor of the College of Education at Michigan State University, who has conducted extensive research into this somewhat foggy realm, for those who don't know about AI, right? Has used software packages such as linguistic inquiry and word count. It's also called LIWC. There's a version 22. Anyway, use that as the engine to tackle massive projects along these lines. And now, while there's great potential and value with this approach, especially even more now with the proliferation and sophistication of AI and ML engines, look at the warning that she gives. The process of quantifying this qualitative data does not make the data unambiguous, but rather opens up the potential of ambiguity hidden behind quantitative data. So with all the benefits we see, there's also some warning. So it's important to be careful, even if you have the best AI tools at your disposal. Trust but verify. We now come to the 5th step, vigilance. The key verb is learn. After prioritizing, relating, concluding, and surveilling, it's now time to measure your success and, guess what? Repeat. Do you remember the key verbs that I gave you before? They all start with the letter L. Very quickly, who can tell me? You know what? Let's see how quick you can do this. What's the first one? Starts with an L? Look. Tell you what, let's just have you do it. Right. Look. What's the second one? Link. Third one? Listen. Leverage. 5th one? Learn. How'd you know it? It's on the screen. Plus, I'm going like this. All right, cool. Look, link, listen, leverage, and learn. Very good. Those are the 5 verbs. All right. So, now, you learn from where you have looked, linked, listened, and leveraged. With this 5th and final step, we see that success in data-driven decision-making cannot be measured until you come to the point where the process is repeatable. Okay? If you can't repeat the process, if it hadn't been documented. Now, show of hands, how many of you believe in documentation? All right, good. All right, thank you. Now, how many of you practice documentation? No, you can put your hand. I'm teasing. You don't have to answer that if you don't want to. That's good. Sorry. I'm not trying to bash anybody who might not like, documentation, because I'll be honest with you, sometimes I don't like it either, but I do it. We got to do it. Whatever the case, if you remember that your process worked and you didn't write down how you did it, now how in the cat hair are you going to know if you can do it again? Duh. Right? Regardless of how we might feel about documentation, we've got to do it. If it's documented, it's repeatable. If it's repeatable, then it's measurable. And if it's measurable, watch this now, then it can be stacked up against your key performance indicators so you can continue to look for ways to improve each time around. Guess what? That's how KPIs relate to ROI. But to do that, you know what it takes? It takes vigilance. It takes what? Learning to get it there. Dr. Milton Maddox, Chief Technology Officer at Castle Shield here in Arizona, recently wrote, listen to this, the measurement of a process, of a flexibility and extensibility, requires it to be repeatable. Otherwise, there is no constant against which to measure and compare. He then went on to say this: repeatability is also essential when trying to measure process improvement, making it a critical factor in the ultimate success of all processes within organizations. Let me show you what I mean. I would like for you to listen to this list of names, and when I'm finished, shout out the first word that comes to your mind. Everybody ready? Pay attention. Watch the screen. Let's go. Don't say it yet. LeBron James, Pete Maravich, Kobe Bryant, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Yao Ming. Tell me, what's the word? Shout it out. Very good. Basketball. Yeah. Now, I hope I didn't make it too obvious with, the uniforms. But with that said, I don't know. I don't think there's a single person in this entire room who doesn't know at least one of these people, if not more, right? I don't know. Maybe I should have added some of the great folks in the Phoenix Suns. Well, for the most part, this represents players who were at the top of their game, during their own time, respectively. I mean, some of these were unforgettable powerhouses of talent and consistency spanning more than half a century. Each of them a coach's dream. Totally irreplaceable, you might say. Or were they? Well, think about it for just a second. With each passing generation, another greatest of all time, another GOAT, right, is going to come up, and he or she is going to soar to even greater heights, only to be replaced again by yet another one who does the same thing in the next generation, over and over, right? Yeah. Now, don't misunderstand me. There are exceptions to what I just said, and I still believe that in some ways, maybe some of these are indeed irreplaceable. Many have said, there will never be another Dr. Joe. No. Seriously, why is it that you can indeed count on the emergence of other phenomenal, talented athletes who will continue to wow both coach and spectator alike? I'll tell you why. Because basketball has a repeatable formula for success. And it is taught that way practically all over the world, not just in the U.S. So, of course, coaches and institutions are going to have their own individual distinctives and personalities and differences. And, not everyone that coaches right is going to win every game. Not going to happen. You know that. Phoenix Suns knows that too. The fundamentals of the game, the skills, the dedication of the players, practice, right? Conditioning, all these factors are consistent and predictable. Now, it's going to result in quite a few outstanding players who consistently excel in spite of the fact that the examples I cited earlier come from wildly different backgrounds and situations, right? But whatever the case, here's my whole point. Why do I bring up basketball? Okay, maybe it's a little bit of an oversimplification, I'll admit that. But look, I do believe the same principle holds true for a data-driven decision-making strategy. Hal Elrod and Cameron Herold, in their book, The Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs, revealed this. Look at this. If there is any not so obvious secret to success in business, this is it. 3 words. Clarify, calculate, and commit to your result-producing process without being attached to your results, emotionally attached. And it does indeed work if you think about it. Let's take a look at these 3 words. Clarify. That is, your objectives need to be clearly defined and articulated so that you know what you're doing. Secondly, calculate. You have to be aware of the steps you'll take, the procedures you'll follow, and the costs that you'll incur to execute those objectives. And finally, commit. Hey, listen to me. All the clarification and the calculation in the world is not going to do you a bit of good at all if you have not made up your mind that you're going through with it, and then do what? Commit the necessary time, energy, and resources to see this thing through all the way to the end. I get excited about this, you can tell. So there you have it. Clarify, calculate, commit. All the right elements of right thinking. And guess what? When you get to this point, it's all driven by data, hopefully. And with that, you have made it from being in data denial to being in data driven. How? Through dominance, relevance, significance, surveillance, and vigilance. In conclusion, your favorite words, right? On September 25th, 1983, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov of the Soviet Air Defense Forces was the officer on duty at the Serpukhov 15 bunker near Moscow, which housed the command center of the Soviets' early warning satellites named Okol. On that day, which incidentally was just 3 weeks after the Soviet military had just shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007, the system reported that a missile had been launched from the United States, followed by up to 5 others. Oh my gosh, yeah, serious. Petrov, for his part, he judged the warning to be a false alarm, and his decision to disobey orders against Soviet military protocol at that time is credited for having prevented an erroneous retaliatory nuclear attack from the United States and our NATO allies. All right, and it would have resulted in a large-scale nuclear war. One source says that Petrov claimed he had a funny feeling in my gut, okay? And they reasoned that if the U.S. had really wanted to attack, well, they'd launch more than just 5 missiles, right? Knowing us, we'd probably launch 500 missiles. You know, these Americans, comrade, always overdo, right? In fact, the investigation later proved that the Soviet satellite warning system had indeed malfunctioned. So what's the lesson here? What's my point? Well, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov has been credited with potentially preventing the start of World War III just because he refused to pay attention to bad data. It's a good thing there wasn't any YouTube back then, right? So should you go with your gut? Well, that's the whole idea, right? It works both ways, doesn't it? Refusing to pay attention to bad data and just going with your gut is just as important and valid as listening to the sound reasoning behind good data and letting it inform your gut. More importantly, to drive your decisions, all right? You know, you may not be credited with saving the world from World War III, but you know what? You might think twice before you believe a couple of college professors who show you a video and tell you that you can go up 2 flights of stairs and somehow wind up right back where you started. No way, Jose. I am not drinking that Kool-Aid. I will take Petrov over Abaganda any day. So what's the whole point? You have learned to, and we don't have time for candy, remember the 5 steps? Say them with me. Dominance, what's the second one? Relevance, significance, surveillance, and, vigilance. Very good. You have to what? Look, link, listen, leverage, and learn. Very good. You do these things, and hopefully you will go from disaster to delight as you let data help drive your decisions. Thank you so much for your time.